It's Father's Day, and it is a complicated day for all of us. And you know what? Cognitive dissonance is something that I go through. And if you guys don't know what that is, I'm going to share a little bit about it. So, hey, let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County history.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
As I heard a scream, I heard a thud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. This podcast serves as a type of therapy and reconciliation for myself, and it is my hope that it helps anyone who has experienced deception, betrayal, and dark trauma. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Trauma.
So today is Father's Day, and I know this is a hard day for many people, not just myself, but I know familial relationships with parents, relationships with other family members, mothers, fathers, whomever, is complicated for a lot of you. And I am no stranger to that. So, I don't know, I just wanted to share my thoughts. Having a father who is in prison for taking the life of my mother obviously creates cognitive dissonance. And I used that term the other day with, I was testifying in something actually, and I said cognitive dissonance, and the lawyer said, well, I don't know what that means. And I had to explain it, but cognitive dissonance, if you don't know, a lot of people talk about it in therapy, but it is, and again, I'm not a therapist, I'm just a guy that's gone through a lot of stuff. But cognitive dissonance is where you know that you have conflicting viewpoints of things. And specifically, in my situation, I have a father who is incarcerated for taking the life of my mother. And I testified against my father. And my father was very, very destructive to my family growing up. He was very destructive to me and my mother. And again, I'm not alone in this, but he's still my father. So I have this conflict going on inside of me, which is I have a very toxic parent that I deal with, that I've had to maintain a relationship with in some form or another for the last 30 years. And then there's the side of me that that knows that he's bad and I don't need have this person in my life. But there's this conflict of, what do I do with this person? So today today is one of those days where it really, really brings up a lot of just, I don't know, pain. Yeah, sure. I guess it could be pain. It could just be, there's something my grandmother said to me, who is my father's mother, who was there in the house the night that my mother's life was taken. And she said to me before she passed away, I was in her kitchen and we were making pizzelle. She was an old Italian woman and she was probably like 84. I think she passed away when she was 84. So she was just kind of looking off in the distance and she said, "My Jackie," because my father's name was John, but he went by Jack. And she said, "My Jackie, what a waste of talent." And she was really lamenting there at the end of her life on what a waste of talent my father was and how he wasted his life doing something that was horrific that destroyed our entire family. And he could have gone another way. There was no reason for him to do what he did. No logical reason, at least. And it's destruction and the ripples of violence and the destruction he caused obviously echoed throughout my family. So today is one of those days where I'm going through cognitive dissonance. And I know that I'm not alone in that. So many of you are too. And I just want to let you know that you're not alone, because I experience it all the time, but today especially, lamenting that. It's interesting because I remember, and I'm going to show this, this is an action figure. This is a He-Man action figure. And for those of you that grew up in, whatever, the 80s or whatever, and were probably a boy or a girl, doesn't matter. You had He-Man action figures, probably. And I remember this character, his name was Manny Faces. And this was something that I remember at the time. My mother, I was probably like 4 years old. We were living in Virginia, and she said, "Go tickle daddy." And I went over and I tickled my father, and everybody wanted this little action figure. So I would see it on the television and stuff. And he had this inside his like coat, obviously in a package. And I got really excited, but I started thinking about this morning because I had found this a few weeks ago, and I started thinking about what this character, Man E Faces, is. And if you see, he has a human face. And then if you rotate, it's a robot face. And then if you rotate it again, it's a monster. And then back again to the human face. But I want to kind of talk about the human face and then the monster, right? And this, again, was an action figure that I have such a vivid memory of this. My father having this in his coat. And I think this was foreshadowing. I mean, look, this was foreshadowing something. That my father was really a Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, in the closing arguments of his murder trial, the prosecutor said he was a healer by day because he was a doctor and a killer by night. My father had multiple affairs on my mother all the time throughout the history of their relationship, from what I came to understand as an adult. And he really was someone who wore many faces or many faces. And I just thought this was so interesting as I'm thinking about it this morning. On such an odd day, Father's Day here, 2023, on what it is like having a birth father that was someone who was duplicitous and a psychopath. And this is how, he presented one thing to the world and then presented at the end the monster. So you have the man, probably the doctor, and then you have the monster. And later on in his letters from prison, he became the robot because it was almost robotic what he would say. So I know a lot of you are going through a lot today. I was also very fortunate to be adopted by a wonderful family later on in life. And my father, George, was able to show me the way. And I had many people that were in my life, many male figures in my life that were positive. Lieutenant David Messmore, who, obviously helped me, helped catch my father. And together we did that. And, and got justice for my mother, but also there are many people, but, shout out to George on this Father's Day. George Ziegler, thank you so much. I love you. I did this last year too, but I think that we don't want to forget these things. And I do videos about Mother's Day or about Father's Day. I don't really do them about Mother's Day just because I think it's really, really painful for me. But, I have an adopted mother. Her name is Susan, and she's a wonderful person too. And without those two in my life, I wouldn't be here to be the person that I am. So, but to all of you that are experiencing pain or cognitive dissonance on today, Father's Day, I'm here with you. Anyways, I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Trauma. Happy Father's Day, y'all.
This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. For exclusive content around this podcast, please consider supporting me via Patreon by going to collierlandry.com/support. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to see video episodes of this podcast, please check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/collierlandry. You can find links to additional resources in the show notes of today's episode. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Collier Landry.